Hi, this is guitarist Denis Taaffe, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Bargain Bin Gear. And today we're going to take a look at some pedal boards, right? A lot of guitarists accumulate a bunch of pedals, different sizes and things. And, well, to power each one, takes a lot of different power sources. So one way to alleviate that and to organize your pedals is to put them on a pedal board that has a power supply, and you can power each pedal. Now, I want to take a look at one in particular today, and it's the Gogh pedal board. And you'll find these on Amazon and other places too. And here's what you get. It's basically an aluminum frame pedal board, and then you get the flight case. And actually, I have to admit, compared to some other well-known pedal board makers that are quite expensive, I think that's a pretty darn good-looking case. Look at this right here, especially for the price. In fact, not only do you get the case, and I'm going to open up right now, and it is padded. It's a padded case. Now, granted, the padding is kind of like paper, but it's pretty nice. And then you get the aluminum pedal board right here. Okay, and it says Ghost Fire, right? And here you've got legs, right? And so you'll put your, a power supply could fit underneath it, and then put some Velcro on here, and there you go. Take a look at that. Wow! Pretty cool. Right? And it holds pretty well, too. Okay. And besides that, these are entire kits. Now let me take a look. Now, here's one. It's a Van Gogh guitar pedalboard, white aluminum pedal board, and it comes with a Ghost Fire case as well. And it comes with everything you need. It comes with a strap for the actual bag, comes with Velcro, thing to mount power supplies, wire clips and things. So basically everything you need to basically make a really expensive pedal board. Now, when you pair that with, for example, the Donner DP1, isolated DC output power supply, now how isolated those outputs are is a little questionable, but usually it works pretty well. It's about $40, and so you'll fit that underneath there. And now this is in contrast to things like the pedal train, pedal boards, and so on that are super expensive. I thought these were pretty nice, really. They do the job very well. However, and price-wise on these, about $60. And that includes the bag and everything. So compare that to some of the other more well-known brands, and you'll see that it's quite a bargain. Now, there are different ones, and some of them are $70. Depends on the size as well, But it's really, and it's quite light, I have to admit. Very, very light. Now, for some people, you know, $60 is the size of the investment. Okay? And that I totally understand. In fact, I hate to admit it, but I bought this used. Right? You know. Now, let's say I wanted a tiny little pedal board, you know, with just a few pedals. And I want just kind of a pedal board, you know, that I can just throw in my, you know, guitar bag, right? It's got a pocket. So I'd like to throw that in there rather than carrying an extra thing. So what I did is I went to an office construction store, you know, kind of like a Lowe's or a Menards, for example. And, you know, they sell these kitchen countertops. Okay, and for whatever reason, you know, they have to cut them to size and that kind of thing. Well, as I was walking by, take a look at this. I think I've done a video on this before. However, look at that. Wouldn't that make a perfect pedal board? This is what's left of the countertop. And what's really nice, it's got just the right amount of space here to give it kind of an angle. And curved. Right here, right? Real nice. Curved, real smooth surface. Right? So it's even better than just, you know, a piece of wood with a little piece of wood underneath it. It's got that curved thing. Now, does this make it a pedal board? Not yet. And this is why. So that was about $1.71. Okay, now, look at this. Felt pads. Foot pads, and they're self-adhesive. So, and these were $1.71 as well. And this will make about 2 pedal boards of these little mini pedal boards. So, go ahead and open these up. So here we go, and we're going to put that. We're going to turn over the pedal board. We're going to put it right on the corner here. There we go. Okay. And now we're going to do the same thing. And we're going to put that on the other end here. Right there. And the reason we're doing this is so that they don't slip on the floor, you know? They don't move. And it's really quite effective. It works really, really well. Okay. So here we go. And what I'm going to do, because it's kind of long, I'm going to go ahead and add one right in the middle here. I'll turn it sideways so you can see. Right? So we got 3 here. Put it right in the middle. And you know, you don't have to measure these or anything. It just looks pretty close. Okay. And now we're going to do the same thing on the other end here of the pedal board. Okay, so now let's put one on the end here. There we go. Let's see that. So now on this end, if you look, I got one there and one there. Alright. And so we're going to do 2 more here, match them up. Okay. And probably the hardest part of this process is getting the little white paper off, you know, exposing the adhesive on the felt feet. Alright, same thing here. We're going to line them up. There we go, close enough. Boom. Okay, see that? Right in the middle, we got two more. One here, one there, and one more. Right here on the end. Okay. There we go. Okay. And there you go. There's a completed pedal board. So now we can put that on the floor. It's kind of at just the right angle. Right? Now, you can get either some dual lock or Velcro. And you can add the pedals, you know, like that, one by one by one. Fit a lot of pedals there. Now these are mini pedals, but you can fit some pretty big pedals. And I'll show you that here in a moment. Now here, for example, here's one of my homemade, you know, Menard pedal boards. This one's pretty old, and I'm quite surprised that the feet are still holding on pretty well, the little Velcro feet. And here I've mounted two pedals, big pedals, and it's just the perfect size for a Boomerang 3 and Boomerang 3 sidecar, right? And so this is quite an option, and this is really handy. Now granted, you've got the power supply, you know, so this I can move around very easily, you know, to different pedal boards. If I want to add the looping function, you know. Now you could also make it, you know, on a big board like the Novo 24. You know, you could add these and make them permanent installations there. And these are just Velcroed on, and you can see they hold on just great. They don't move around or... Very solid. Very, very solid. So there you go. Okay, so now this thing, right, it weighs as much as this thing, even in the case, because this is very light. This is not so light. On the other hand, this is like, you know, less than $5. And that's including tax. So that's pretty good. And works very well, actually. You know, now it's you know, not as fancy, of course. You know, and if you do want a power supply, it's going to be, you know, one of the pedals here. So you're going to see cables and those kinds of things. You know, but it sure beats missing, you know, better than having a bunch of cables all over the place. You know, right here. So anyway, that's one possibility. And you can find these countertop laminate leftovers at most Menard stores. You know, hardware store. Now, obviously, not everyone will have a Menard store nearby. But if you do, this is one possibility, and it's very inexpensive. And of course, you know, the next thing is to, you know, have some dual lock or Velcro here, you know, that'll connect the pedals together. You know, for little tiny pedals, this works very well, you know. And you can just throw that in your gig bag, you know. And for me, you know, if I play live somewhere, you know, I usually carry 2 amps, you know, especially where little coffee house gigs, I carry 2 guitar amps and, you know, over my shoulder guitar bag, and so I can just put this in the pocket of the guitar bag with my pedals, and so I don't have to make a whole bunch of trips back and forth, to bring in the gear. Now, if you want something a little bigger, obviously, something like this. Okay? And concept's the same, Okay. Now here, we have a pedal train. Okay, it's a Novo 24, and that's quite a big board. Right here, you see that? Right here. Novo 24 pedal train. Okay. And in this particular one, substantially more expensive. I mean, here we're starting to get into hundreds of dollars, really. And in this particular one right now, we have a power source right here. Okay, and in this case, it's the Power Pedal Voodoo Lab Power or Pedal Power Digital. Okay, right here. You can see it through the bar. It's mounted underneath, right there. Okay, and that has basically 4 truly isolated power sources. Okay, and so you basically run these little power cables right here to your pedal. And in this case, it's particularly made to work best with digital pedals, such as something like any Strymon pedal or Eventide pedal, that kind of thing. Okay, so we can run these. Here we go. And so just run the cable, goes up into the pedal, so all the cables are mounted underneath. Now this particular one, for whatever pedal they were running, they actually mounted a power strip here, just with some wire ties, really, right? And here in the plug. Comes in very handy, quite frankly. If you want to try out a pedal and, you just want to plug in the power supply or so on, this is one way to do it, and pretty easily. Okay. Now, this is quite a big pedal board, really. And I have 2 of these, and at one time I actually bolted them together. And while it was great to have a huge pedal board, you could put as many pedals as you wanted, just about, except for one thing. It was great in that sense, but moving it around and things was a nightmare, disaster. Right? So that didn't work for me at all, In fact, I'd much rather have 2 smaller ones, that when I get somewhere I can connect them together, basically connect the cables together, put it side by side, than I would having to carry in one gigantic pedal board that weighs a lot, and is very cumbersome. And so, and underneath here, you can have quite a bit underneath the pedal board, especially on these pedal trains. One, you can have the power supply here, right, the Voodoo Lab, and then on top of that, any MIDI type things, you can have a little MIDI through pedal, that distributes MIDI to all your pedals. You can have a little box mounted underneath here as well. And works very well, very light as well. Okay. So that's another possibility. But here, I mean, you're getting into a quite expensive proposition. You know, especially the power supply alone is quite expensive. You know, I mean, more than $100. I'm not sure exactly how much. You know, but I think from what I remember, it was like 150 or something. I'm not sure exactly. Anyway, quite expensive. And the pedal board as well. It comes with a bag, you know, which is pretty much along the lines of the Ghostfire bag. You know, so nothing spectacular there. Or you can spend more and get a case, you know, and that definitely protects the pedals a little better, quite frankly, but it's heavier and that kind of thing, you know. And interestingly, if it's a pedal train board, you can't buy them separately, you know. Kind of a rotten deal if you ask me, you know. So in other words, you can buy a pedal train with a bag initially, but you can't go back and buy a hard case for it. You know, it's kind of a scam to get you to pony up for the case in the first place when you buy the board. I think that's right. Yeah. Anyway. But, so that's another option. Okay. Okay. And then there's one more option, and I'll show you that here. Okay, now here's another option, and that's this case right here. It's a metal case. And this is kind of the classic pedal board, you know. There's not much fancy about it. In fact, the top of it is actually on the hinges here. So what you do is you open it up, you remove the back here, and it's got padding right there to protect the pedals. And then this is actually serves as your pedal board here, right? Now here I've got all kinds of wires. I got a couple pedals in there, and here's a little power supply, right? It just lays flat on the ground, you know, and works pretty well, you know. But it's flat. You know, and you've got that lip on the actual case here, you know, this kind of lip. But usually the pedals are thick enough, you know, that this doesn't change. Doesn't make it impossible to hit the switches or anything. And same thing, this is just Velcro. Right, the whole bottom here is Velcroed. And you Velcro it that way. Okay. So that's another option. One thing I really like about this style, obviously, is the protective nature of the case. Okay, this is going to beat out a, you know, flimsy bag any day. You know, because it's just very solid, obviously. Okay, but the concept is the same. You know, you got a pedal, you know, and here's your power distribution. So that's another option. And usually they are a little, depending, are a little more expensive. Just because you're paying, you know, for the case as well. So let me close this back up. There we go. And then just like a suitcase or a briefcase, you know. You got two clasps here, metal clasp, and the handle, and that's it. You're ready to go. So that's another possibility. Pretty nice. Now, okay. So those are some different options pedalboard options, you know. And, you know, if you're on a real budget, you know, the Menards one, the homemade ones, you know, and, I mean, you've got to be, I guess, a little creative. You know, I mean, I've seen people use wood crates, or wood pallets, I mean, you know, as pedal boards. Not the whole thing, I mean, they cut it down, obviously. So, that's one possibility. And for the little power supplies to power all those pedals, you know, the little isolated ones that are 30, 40 bucks on Amazon are quite an inexpensive option. You know, now when you go up to something like, you know, the Voodoo Labs, you know, in this case the digital, you know, the power supply digital, I think. Yeah. The pedal power digital. There you're paying quite a bit. You know, so they go up from price from there. Now from there, there are even some more expensive pedal boards. And there you start getting up into the $500-$600 range. A good example are the Friedman pedal boards, which are very expensive. And I remember, I think I saw one for like $500. It was quite a bit of money, you know. Any of these will really do, though. You know, I don't know. The bag is very nice, you know, but as far as padding goes, it's not all that great. You know, obviously, especially the Ghostfire ones. I mean, you can feel in there the padding is very little. You know, but don't forget, I mean, these pedals are metal housings and things. So unless it takes a real blow, you know, to break a pedal, but that would be terrible. So that would be terrible, you know, to break a pedal that way, you know, in transport, obviously. So that's why I like those hard shell cases a little better. You know, granted, it makes it heavier and so on and so on. Then you have to think about, you know, the cabling, wire, you know, the cables. So that's another expense, you know, and now for me, you know, granted there are cable kits you can buy, you know, there are solderless cables, or you can solder cables together. The truth is, as far as cables, and they do make a difference as far as sound goes. You know, but I remember I bought a bulk pack of like 3-foot cables. You know, because I had a pretty big board, I guess. And they were very cheap. You know, color coded, just, you know, standard cables. And, you know, I just used those to wire up the pedal board, you know. And at the time, it was just to see, you know, what I was going to need. But in the end, I just left them. And it's been working great, you know. Never a problem, you know. But obviously, more expensive cables, you know, will affect the sound and that kind of thing. But I was pretty pleased with that. And I think like all the cables together were like, I don't know, like $20 or something. So, I mean, they weren't exactly the greatest cables, you know, but they fit just fine. Any excess, you know, is underneath the board, you know. Now, you know, obviously, you know, if you want to, you know, there are professional board builders that cut the cable exactly the size and solder them in and that kind of thing, you know, which is great, but that's another expense, you know. And then on top of that, there's risers, so you can add another layer of pedals and things. My experience with pedal boards is quite simple. Get the biggest one you can. Right? Because you always, boy, if I just had space for this one extra pedal, always. And I've run into that. In fact, that was part of the reasoning for buying another Novo 24 board and putting them together, Oh gosh, if I just had this much space more, I could add these pedals and so on. Okay, anyway. And, one other thing is if you're using MIDI, you can use standard MIDI cables, but keep in mind that, depending on where the MIDI jack is on the pedal, right, you've got to make space for that MIDI plug, right? Now, the option or the solution to that is right angle MIDI cables, but you pay for those, and quite frankly, a lot of them are quite flimsy. But that's another consideration you really have to think of, when you put a pedal on. Is not just the instrument cable, but if you're using MIDI, MIDI jacks. In fact, I'm just looking at one of the boards I have here, and I noticed that in between two of the pedals, I ran out of the right angle MIDI cables, so I've got, about that much space between them to accommodate the MIDI pedals, which unfortunately are on each side, on there. So that's another consideration. Now, online there's all kinds of pretty cool pedal board planners. And it shows you an empty pedal board, and you can go through a list, choose the pedal you have, and it pops up, a picture of the pedal, and you can place it on the board and that kind of thing. But I mean, it's kind of, obviously, you can plan that ahead of time, and see which pedal you want where and that kind of thing. And the best part of it all, I guess, is whether you're using dual lock or Velcro, it's not a permanent solution. I mean, you can remove the pedal and move it and so on. Which is one of the reasons why I have all these different pedal boards, depending on the situation, Yeah. And it definitely makes it a lot easier than having just pedals, flopping around all over the place. Just a little bit of organization. Do I think $500-600 pedal boards are worth it? For the average home user, probably not, quite frankly. Now, if you're, touring all the time and, or a member of a professional band that tours and so on, then definitely, yeah, it's worth it. But for many people, probably don't need that much of a heavy-duty thing. As long as you're careful, the bags have worked. I mean, I've taken a pedal board, the Novo 24. Remember, I played a radio show, and I had just gotten the Novo 24 pedal board. And so I wasn't sure, how, whether the pedals would stay on and those kinds of things. And all I had was the bag that it came with, but it did just fine, and the pedals weren't damaged or anything like that. I'd say definitely if you're, doing long distance traveling, you might want to consider you know, a hard shell case, something like this. You know, and Novo Pedal Train sells hard shell cases. However, as I mentioned before, I think you can only buy them if you've already when you buy the pedal board. They don't separate them. In other words, you can't buy it later. That's a dirty pool, really. Okay, so there you go. You know, and I mean, just for home use, you know, I mean, you know, you can even go to the lumber store and, you know, pick up a couple of pieces of wood, and, you know, it doesn't have to be that big a deal. But it's a nice way to organize your pedals, you know, especially when you're playing, you know, and you don't want to have a pedal at a weird angle where you have to move over to hit it and that kind of thing, you know. When it's all on a pedal board, it's very organized and very simple to get to and very clean, and can alleviate a lot of noise, you know, and a lot of cables, right? And can actually give you a better sound too, you know, depending. And definitely the two parts there that are most important are the power supplies, right? Whatever power source you're using. A lot of people use a little one spot, you know, and when you daisy chain those, they're not isolated. And so there's a tendency that you can get noise from that setup. But, you know, if you're only running, you know, a couple, whatever, you know, 3 or 4 of these, you should be able to get away with it. You know, or step up to one of these little, you know, $30, $40 isolated power supplies. But I would say for very expensive pedals, you know, like the Eventide pedals or Strymon pedals, that kind of thing, it's definitely worth it to get the, you know, like the Voodoo Labs, you know, the Pedal Power Digital or something like that. And there they are truly isolated, you know, so you get a lot of really clean power and consistent power. Okay. Anyway, so definitely, you know, worthwhile. And you can move the pedals around, you know, to different boards depending on the situation, that kind of thing. For example, I have you know, I've got pedal boards in my studio room, and then I've got a pedal board, you know, when I'm playing in my living room, right? And let's say I want to use a couple of the pedals, I can pull them up and just put them on the other board, you know, and it doesn't take very long, you know, hook them up and that kind of thing. Okay, so anyway, those are their options. And I love my little homemade pedal boards just because they come in so handy, you know. I mean, there's not much to it, really. But it does organize the pedals well enough, you know, to use that way. All right. So there you go. There's pedal boards. A look at pedal boards. All right. See you next time.